Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to dive deep into things like, what does our industry need that it just doesn't have? What are the things you want to know, but you're just too afraid to ask? And what are the biggest opportunities ahead for our industry? We're going to go deep, and nothing is off limits. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Corralling the Chaos. Today, I want to talk about doing business in the state of California. I know it can seem daunting, scary, super expensive, and I've just heard a number of companies out there just say, you know what, I'm not even going to deal with it. I don't want to touch it. But that comes at a cost too, right? Because let's face it, in California, there's a lot of great events, a lot of entertainment, just a lot of things are happening out there. And so today I really wanted to just spend some time just talking about what does it mean to do business in the state of California. So there's about 12 different components of things that you need to really understand if you're comfortable with, if you have the wherewithal to become compliant. And so we're going to kind of dig into those 12 things at a very high level. Some of them have to do with payroll. Some of them have to do with just how you interact with your people. And some of them have to do with reporting. So we're just going to kind of take it step by step. So let's talk about the pay rules. So obviously in California, they just do things a little bit different. So we're just going to say it like that. Beautiful state, beautiful weather, but it's difficult. They make it difficult to do business out there and to have employees out there. But it doesn't have to be as difficult and as scary as some might think it is. So we're going to unpack that. So when it comes to pay rules in California, they treat overtime differently. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. So in most states, not all, but most, you are required to pay your people weekly overtime after 40 hours in a week. In the state of California, and a couple more out there like Colorado, they have different rules. But in California, you have to pay daily overtime. So anything after 8 hours in a day, you would have to pay time and a half, all the way up to 12 hours. After 12 hours, you have to pay double time, so double their rate. They also have a rule called the 7th consecutive day pay rule. So if they're working 7 consecutive days, there's also a surcharge on that. And they also have pay frequency variances. So it's not like you can pay them once a month. So they want to make sure the state of California is very employee friendly. So you have to pay your people often enough. There's also something called the Sick Leave Act, which basically says for every 30 hours worked, your employee, even if they're a freelancer, your W-2'd person, would accrue 1 hour of sick time. Now, that sounds fairly straightforward. However, these laws vary by city in the state of California. So you're required to manage, there's max balances, there's balances that carry over, and then there's annual usage limits. So how much can your employees actually utilize each year? The third one is there's new OSHA requirements. It's called AB 1775. And what that states is an employee must complete the OSHA 10, the OSHA 10 General Entertainment Safety Training, or just the OSHA 10 as applicable to their occupation. So obviously in our world, it definitely applies. It also says heads of departments and leaves have to complete the OSHA 30 training and that they're certified through that program. The fourth thing is the California Employment Training Tax. So not only are you paying payroll taxes because according to AB 5, you have to W-2 people who are working for your company while working in that state. So not only are you going to pay Social Security, Medicare, federal unemployment, and state unemployment, the state of California has a fifth tax called the California Employment Training Tax. It's typically about 0.1%. Also related to payroll are pay data requirements. So if you're an employer that have 100 or more full-time equivalent employees, you must report payroll and hours worked data by establishment, their job category, their sex, their race, and ethnicity to the Civil Rights Department. And that has to be done annually. So that's one of those reporting requirements we talked about. Also in the state of California, there's meal penalties. If somebody is working more than 5 hours straight without a meal break, there's a penalty. So the time that you're leaving them on the clock until they get a break, you are paying them time and a half. There's also the California Pay Transparency Law. This is a new one. It's becoming effective January 1st of 23. And it basically says you as the company and the employer, you have to post the pay rate with any job offer, both internal or external offering that you have. Good news is most of us are already doing that, right? Like, hey, I'm looking for a stagehand. I'm looking for a general AV tech. I'm looking for an A1. Here's what this job is paying. But sometimes we don't always see that, right? Sometimes there's a posting, hey, I'm looking for, this many of this type of job discipline, apply here. And starting January, you're now going to have to post that pay rate with any job. There's also the COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave law, which allows covered employees to take up to 40 hours of COVID-19 related sick leave. There's also the California Labor Code 6409.6A, for those of you who want to look that up. So again, it's 6409.6A. And it requires employers to provide COVID notices with 1 business day of notification of a potential exposure. Hopefully, knock on wood, we are mostly past all of that, but it does still apply. The 10th one is called SB 1343, and it now requires all employers who have 5 or more employees provide training. So let me tell you, and it's paid training. So they have to provide 1 hour of sexual harassment and abusive conduct prevention training to all non-managerial employees and 2 hours of sexual harassment and abusive conduct prevention training to managerial employees every 2 years. So not only do you need to procure the training you want to provide, you need to figure out how you want to roll it out, how you want to track it, manage it, and then again, this is paid training. So anybody who completes the training, you are required to pay them. And then manage that rollout again every 2 years. So again, that one's called SB 1343. The 12th one is the Labor Code Section 2802. It has to do with reimbursing expenses. So an employee is entitled to be reimbursed by his or her employee for all necessary expenditures or losses incurred by the employee in direct consequence of the discharge of his or her duties or his or her obedience to the directions of the employer. So basically, in a nutshell, you have to reimburse for any business-related expenses such as equipment, materials, training, business travel, uniforms. All of that is now a requirement. And again, related to AB 5, we are talking about employees, not 1099s, because the foundation of all of this is if you're doing business in California, according to AB 5, you must be W-2ing these folks. Even if they only work 1 10-hour day for you throughout the year, the Department of Labor says they are an employee. And then the last one is related to FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. The California didn't think that federal mandate was enough, so they wanted to institute a state mandate, which is called the California Family Rights Act. It basically allows eligible employees to take up to 12 paid or unpaid weeks off for various family and medical reasons. So it's similar to FMLA. It's just the criteria in the state of California is a little bit different. It's different, as an example, it's different than FMLA because FMLA only allows for 12 weeks off for a birth of a child if there's complications for pregnancy. The CFRA doesn't have that contingency. So again, these are 12 on top of the big one, which is AB 5. If you have any questions, reach out. Happy to go through this with you. Happy to talk through how to set up some of these processes. There's obviously companies out there who will employ people if you're going to California, so it's one less thing you have to do. But if it's something you really want to tackle yourself, those are the 13 things that you need to be thinking about if you're going to do a show in California with employees. Again, it counts even if it's for 1 day. You're exposed unless you follow these things. So hopefully that's helpful. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. Thanks so much.